you so much to Gina and Hannah for inviting me. It's a real actual pleasure to be able to sort of even think back and write in the slides, talk about my own career. So I have said to Gina to stop me at 10 minutes, so then I'll know I've only got 5 more, because there's a danger I might get carried away. So just to kick off, and I'll end, well, maybe I'll just start by saying I'm Managing Director of Waterwise, which is a UK-wide campaigning organisation. So that's where I am now, but I'm going to take you through the journey. So this is the state school that I attended in Oxford, right in the middle of Oxford, very lovely mixed school where I really prospered, and which I loved. And then I went to Trinity College, Cambridge, which was extremely different. I'm 50 now, so this was, 30 odd years ago. And it was very white, very posh, very male. And at the time, I felt like I had an absolutely brilliant time and I made a lot of friends for life. But looking back, I took a real knock to my confidence going there as a working class woman, working class young woman. So it was brilliant, and it's set me on the path that I'm on now, but it wasn't all plain sailing, I suppose I should say, right from the beginning. There were always challenges. So at Cambridge I studied social and political sciences, and then in the last summer I volunteered for the Labour MP in Cambridge who was called Anne Campbell. So I was volunteering, clearly working for free, and I was actually staying in college and claiming housing benefit for that, and the college just did not know what to do with that. I don't think they'd ever had anyone claim housing benefit and lived there before. So that was the end of my 3 years at Cambridge. And then this is the Jordanian flag. I then went out for a year to live and work in Jordan. I didn't have a year out before I went to university, so I thought, well, I have one now. I answered an advert in The Guardian. I went and spoke for a governess for a very rich Jordanian family. I went and spoke to a man in the Docklands in shipping, who was, even though I just spent 3 years at Cambridge, he was the poshest man I'd ever spoken to. And he employed me to be a governess to this rich family, which didn't work out that well because I was expected to turn the children into model students overnight, and they'd been a bit spoiled. So I lasted there for 6 weeks, and then I started teaching in a school where I taught little girls primary French and English, which I absolutely loved. And then I came back and started working at the Houses of Parliament, which had always been my dream, to work for a Labour MP. That was the extent of my ambition. And at that time, it was a Conservative government, so there weren't that many Labour MPs around, a bit like now. So you had to volunteer, you had to get your foot in the door. And I was at my parents' home in Oxford, where I grew up, as I said, and I had a phone call from an MP who'd just been elected in a by-election, and she was a friend of Anne Campbell. She said, would you like to come and work for me part-time, just on expenses, 100 quid a week? I said, yes, I would, yes, please. So I went and slept on my friend's floor in London and worked for her. And then I started working for, see if it comes up, for Margaret Beckett. So Labour was still in opposition at this time. And Margaret Beckett had been the deputy leader of the party. And then John Smith, the leader of the party, had died. She'd become the leader. And then there was an election, leadership election. Tony Blair won. She stood but lost. So she effectively became a backbencher overnight, and she had sackloads of mail, and she needed somebody to help out. So that was my big break. I went and worked for her, just helping with the letters, and no emails then, letters and phone calls. And then she became Shadow Health Secretary. So I was part of her team of 6 people then. That was the start of the privatisation of the NHS, and we used to get all sorts of traumatic phone calls from people saying, I've been on the waiting list for 3 years. I've got, sending photos that would fall out of envelopes of terrible wounds, and people have been waiting for operations or even for medical treatment. So that got me started in, working with people and picking up some of these traumatic phone calls and just listening and supporting people. Also, I was in charge of running the campaign visits. So she was obviously a politician, and Labour was running campaign visits to all sorts of areas. So that was very exciting too, and got me going on all that. And then really in that office, in an opposition office, even for Shadow Cabinet, you're doing all the photocopying, all the phone calls, as well as writing speeches or the media. So it was a real really good training in being a jack of all trades. She then became Shadow Trade and Industry Secretary. I've put their information superhighway. I mean, some of you will think this is mad, but I remember a team meeting with Margaret and her ministerial team. And one of them, it was Jeff Hoon, came and said, oh, there's this thing called the information superhighway. I think we should take it really seriously. And half the ministers were going, oh, wow, that sounds really cool. And the others were going, oh, I don't think we need to worry about this. And of course, it was what became the internet and basically how we're living our lives right now in this event. So I worked on that. I went to the Brits. That was very exciting because that was one of her policy areas. And then we had the 1997 general election. Super exciting. I could only ever remember a Tory government. I was very Labour, and we won. So, hold on, my slides have decided to, there we go. So then Margaret became the Secretary of State for Trade and Industry, and I was still working for her. We brought in the first ever minimum wage. Then Peter Mandelson came in as Trade and Industry Secretary, so Margaret became Leader of the House. So she did a lot of modernisation of the Commons. She ran the legislative programme, so basically chairing the committee that decided which legislation was coming to Parliament each year. And we ran an entirely successful campaign on the Millennium Bug because, as you will remember, nothing happened. And that's not because nothing was going to happen, it's because of all the preparation. So by this time, I was a special advisor, and I've put down there, living in the dark, the truth about special advisors, you know, if you watch this In the Thick of It and all that kind of thing. Special advisors do get a bad rap. And there are a wide range of special advisors, people, behaviours, how they do their jobs. I didn't do media, I did policy, and the two of us, Margaret's special advisors, we split the policy areas between us. So my role was anything environment. Well, once we got to DEFRA after the 2001 general election, my role was anything environmental, liaising with NGOs, telling them what I thought Margaret would think, telling Margaret what they thought, working with policy officials, helping policy officials unblock issues with other government departments. Amazing. I loved it. And these were some of the areas that we covered. And actually, ironically, now we did a lot of flying around the world to save the world. Not that great on the carbon front, but it was incredible the amounts of places we went to and very exciting. 2003, my first daughter was born, Kitty. She's now 18. And then we had the 2005 general election. So after the general election, I left. I'd done 3 elections, had a toddler. It was quite a full-on job. So I decided to move on. And it wasn't the easiest of decisions because when I left, I didn't have a job set up. I just knew I needed to do something else for my well-being. And also I just thought, well, whatever I find, I probably won't love it as much. But it turned out I did. So I co-founded Waterwise, where I am now as managing director, but there's been a bit of a journey between then and now. So we started it from scratch. We were in a basement in Water UK. The chairs were broken. Somebody said, you need a brand. We said, what's a brand? What's that? But by the end of our first year, we were playing key roles in ministerial drought summits. I'd been on the Today programme, given evidence to the Select Committee, hosted the Waterwise Awards a couple of years later with the Environment Agency chair in the House of Lords. We identified the CapEx bias in the water sector. First of all, people used to laugh and say, there's no CapEx bias. But we knew because the water efficiency managers and the companies were telling us about this. So we managed to get that part of the mainstream, and then Ofwat brought in Totex to help address it. Still doing the photocopying on top of all this stuff because Waterwise was a very small organisation. There's only about 2 or 3 of us when we set it up. And while I was at Waterwise, Ted's got 2 dates there. I had Ted, now 13, and then I had Florence. So just to let you know that I had children in the midst of these busy careers, and each time I had 6 months off. So I then moved to Ofwat. I'd wanted to work at Ofwat for a long time. I got headhunted quite a few times for jobs there. 2 or 3 times I applied for jobs there. I got down to the last few, and they kept saying, we really want you, but you don't have experience in managing a large team, which was sort of one of the civil service tick boxes. So kept getting headhunted, trying again. And then Regina Finn, who was the chief exec at the time, said, why don't you just come in on secondment? So I went in on secondment for a year, and then they advertised the job, open applicants, and I applied and got the job. So I stayed at Ofwat for 4 years. And one of the things I was working on was bringing the legislation through Parliament from the Ofwat side, which brought in the retail water market and also the resilience duty. for the water sector in England and Wales. So then we had to breathe life into that. What did it mean? Strategic approach to Wales. At the time, Ofwat was very England centric. Now it isn't. It's great on this stuff, but obviously two different political regimes there, equally important for Ofwat and the customers that it regulates for. I was in charge of sort of protecting Ofwat's independent regulations, not just me, but it was my lead as a director at Ofwat, which was the next step down from the executive team. So it's sort of my big break really at Ofwat. I mean, all of these jobs I've enjoyed equally, but at Ofwat it gave me the range of skills that I needed to then step up, because as I've said there, I was a member of the Waterwise board. I was working closely with the Ofwat board. Catherine Ross, the chief exec, was my line manager, which was an amazing privilege. And I learned a lot from her about the well-being of your team and how important that is. Just going to say this before I move on to the next one. In my annual review meetings, I used to go in, see Catherine, and the first question she asked me was, "Are you happy?" Which I think is amazing. And I learned a lot from her as a line manager and as a leader.
5 more minutes, Nikki.
Is that
5
2 minutes?
more minutes? Yeah.
5 more minutes. That's perfect. Thanks, Gina. I should be just on track. So then I came back 4.5 years ago to Waterwise as managing director. And when I came back, I inherited quite a few financial challenges, which we managed to sort out. But it was probably the biggest challenge to my resilience that I've ever had. I had a wonderful chair and board, and they helped me through it. And now Waterwise is firing on all cylinders. We've got a fantastic team. We're impactful in the sector, driving water efficiency. It's now mainstream. Still loads more to do. We're running UK-wide campaigns throughout the year. We're known as a powerful influencer, and our funding is stable, which is also great. So in this role, obviously I'm leading Waterwise. I also am an active mentor in the sector to a man my age and a woman half my age, which is actually amazingly powerful for me. I learn a lot from both of them. I'm working hard to be an active anti-racist ally, and really, really hard to bring Waterwise on the same journey. And my chair and I really care about that, as do my team and board. So we're always looking at what we can do to better represent and listen to diverse voices, and also look more like the sector that we represent. Although, just to say on sectors, we are in the water sector, but we identify in various ways. We're in the environment sector, we're in the third sector, so the charity sector, if you like, and we're campaigning organisations. So you know, we identify in various different ways. We aren't only in the water sector. I'm a chair of governors. This has been an important part of my career. I was a governor when we lived in London, and I was chair of governors for a little bit. We now live in North Shropshire, at a junior school where the children went, and now I'm a governor at the high school. I absolutely love it, and it's a complete privilege to do it. And recently I've become a trustee of a national youth development charity, Power 2, which is again something that I've really, really wanted to do for a long time, be a trustee on a charity with social impact, because social justice is what really, really drives me, and that's been the thread throughout my career. This is my final slide before I move to thank yous and questions. What would I say to my younger self? I would say your voice matters. Don't worry about other voices speaking louder or speaking at great length. Don't worry about what if I say the wrong thing. Your voice matters just as much as those other people in that meeting. And how am I going to say this? Yeah, the other people in the meeting that were intimidating me and speaking over me were not always men. They you know, sometimes they were women too. So I would say, you know, be a sister. Also, tell your younger self, your voice is super important. And I suppose the other thing I would say was, you know, it's all going to be okay. Whatever you do, make sure you enjoy it and put your well-being at the heart of it. And that's absolutely what I do in my team. My number one priority at Waterwise is the well-being of the team. And my second priority is water efficiency. Thank you, that's it. So there's my email if anybody wants to get in contact, and also my Twitter handle. You can follow me on Twitter, and I would be delighted to take any questions. So I'm going to stop sharing now. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Nikki. That was really good. From where you started to where you are now is very, very different. So quite inspiring.
Thank you.
Never stopping. So that's really good. So guys, if you have any questions, please put them on the Q&A chat, and Nikki would be answering them. I do have a question until someone posts a question. Is for water-wise, what are your ambitions for the future? Where do you think it will get to? Do you think you will be able to change some of? I know you already are. I've been in the website checking it out.
Great.
It's kind of things I really like. I can see it is trying to change some policies and regulations. So what do you think the future holds for water-wise?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we are proud of what we've achieved, but there is so much more to do. So we have managed to drag water efficiency into the mainstream, but it's not really in the mainstream in government. In the sector, it kind of is. If you look at the narrative from Ofwat, it's all about water efficiency at the heart of the challenges and the solutions. Although sometimes the regulatory cost models spit out, they say the computer says no, so there's still a bit to do in the regulatory framework. But in government as a whole, decisions on economic growth, housing growth, like the big decisions were on the big tables. Water doesn't really get a look in there, which is absolutely bonkers. Well, you all know on the drainage side, as well as on the water scarcity side, it's absolutely bonkers that it doesn't feature in those decisions. It's essential to economic growth, let alone improving the environment, which is a stated government commitment. So we wanted to get a seat at the table. There's a lot to do on non-household, so business water efficiency. The market was supposed to help with that in England, and it has a bit, but not enough. So we're working with stakeholders on that. We want to see more water efficiency. On the household side, so how much each of us use, we've doubled it really in my lifetime, how much we use daily. We're going to need to halve it again soon. Again, in my lifetime, is before it gets urgent and frightening. Yeah. Like happened in Cape Town, we need to do that. Yeah. And then the last thing I would say, because it's quite a long answer, sorry, is on the campaigning front, the behaviour change bit, absolutely essential. So we've all got a part to play. So we really want to bring the water sector on a journey where they're already doing some good stuff, but we want to move them on from awareness raising into actual behaviour change and measure the impact of some of those campaign interventions so we can dial them up again when we really need to.
Great, thank you.
I have a question, Nikki. So you, I think, forgive me if I get this wrong, but you went from working at the government, at Parliament, and then you took a maternity break, and then you founded WaterWise. Was it a daunting experience going from that sort of environment into like founding this cut with WaterWise? I can only imagine back then it was a very male-dominated environment. How did you cope with that, and what made you do it?
That's great questions, Hannah. When I founded WaterWise, I did it with a colleague who is a man. He was a very, very enlightened man, but he was actually, I think my sort of self-reflections would be, I'm a strong manager and a strong leader, but I need to be in a team. I'm not really a starter-upper. I couldn't have done it by myself, I suppose, is what I'm saying. So he and I together founded it. Yeah, and I suppose in terms of, the sector now is still extremely male-dominated, isn't it? And it's still extremely white. Actually, that's one of the other things I want to do with WaterWise. I really want to make a difference on that and bring intersectionality in as well to the water sector, so people are recognising the multiple impacts on some of their customers and not just seeing them in silos. I have been, when I was at Ofwat, actually, there was a lot of patronising done by quite a few people, and I did find that hard at the beginning. I'm not quite sure how I overcome that. Again, I've had knocks to my confidence throughout my career, but somehow I've ended up in the end resilient and tried to call out for other people when I see it happening to them as well. And I think people did do that for me, not enough. I think more people are doing that now because they're noticing it. And just again to say that's something that I'm really trying to do on being an active anti-racist ally. I think it's really important. You can't just be not racist, you know, not racist. You have to actively be anti-racist and call things out, and that's the way I try and run my career. And actually, I've tried quite hard across the sector to get. So I don't know if you know the 10-finger challenge, which it was put on an Institute of Water. It's on TikTok, but it was on the Institute of Water webinar I did. And it was 5 Black women speaking, and the questions were, put your finger down if this has ever happened to you. And all the Black women had their hands down, and my hands were like this, which is a really visible thing of my privilege. And so I spoke to some of the sector leaders that I know and asked them to do it with their board and with their exec teams. And they've started, some of them say, yeah, we'll try that, because I think that kind of thing is how I can just make a tiny difference and hopefully use my privilege, you know, as a leader in the sector to make a difference. So that actually wasn't what you started asking on, but hopefully it's interesting anyway.
Very useful, definitely.
Yeah, no, that was definitely really interesting. Yeah, your progression from the government to where you are now to Waterwise and off what and then back to Waterwise is really
That's
interesting.
the other thing I was going to say, actually, Hannah. You've reminded me that the big challenge for Waterwise is that we had to raise all our own funding, of course. You don't have to do that in government. Yeah, funding's really tight in government and in the regulators, and it gets cut every year, but you don't have to, you're not starting from scratch. So that was one of the big differences in moving to a campaigning organisation. But I think it has helped me because I know sort of how the companies work, because I've been around engaging with them in different ways. So now in Waterwise, trying to mobilise them, I know, you know, a bit about how they tick. So I think that's helped. And just on the male point that you made, Hannah, as well, the really male dominated environment that I was in was the political one, even more so than the water sector. And you know, still, I mean, still now, but then there would often be, you know, a press conference during the Labour Party campaign that was all men and, you know, the kind of stuff that, and actually, Margaret Beckett was the first female foreign secretary, and even still now the BBC's forgotten and is talking about Liz Truss as the first female foreign secretary. Well, Margaret Beckett was, she literally was. So yeah, the political sector was very male dominated, even in the Labour Party.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we can close off now.
I've got a question for Nikki. How have you found your work experience in the various organisations you've worked in has helped you actually deal with the public?
That is a really good question as well, and actually reminded Barbara, I should have said that a few years ago I was made a CIWEM honorary fellow, much to my delight. It reminded me when I saw your CIWEM come up. I should have said that before. I definitely think the political bit helped with that. Excuse me, being out knocking on doors, you know, speaking to people for the politician that I worked for. I was also a Labour councillor for a year, I should say. So, you know, only for a year before I moved house, but that was part of it. When Margaret was Shadow Health Secretary and we were getting all those phone calls, that was really a really good leveller about, you know, you pick up the phone, anybody could be on the phone, and often they were in deep distress. And so it was a really important balance between listening and sort of caring and just not draining yourself too much, and also still needed to get the job done by the end of the day. So I think that was really useful, and that's, for me, that's what it's all about. It's about people and social justice, and trying to make things fairer. So yeah, I think the political bit has really helped with that. And then obviously when I was in Ofwat, it was all about customers. The customers first agenda was starting to come into Ofwat then, and in Waterwise, it's absolutely essential that we engage with people to help them to change their behaviour. So I think it has helped me, and I think the other thing I've learned over time is about how I engage with people. So I've learned that my approach is legitimate, is as legitimate as someone doing, you know, a very serious face and having a load of statistics in their presentation. I might have some usually, but my approach is just as valid. And in media interviews, I've really noticed that, and select committee things, it really engages people, and then you can get them listening. I'm not saying it's better. I'm saying over time, I've realised that it's as valid as, you know, something a bit more serious. So, and that's all to do with how I engage with people. And I'm sure some of that come out of the political grounding, because it's pretty fierce when you're knocking on people's doors and they they tell you what they think. You know, it's a good training ground.
And you were saying that the politicians aren't quite up to speed with the water issues, but the industry is. What about the public?
Oh gosh, well, our research shows that the public just, I mean, during COVID, the public were literally seeing the value of water for saving lives. And we need to try and hold on to that, because what customers tell us is that, you know, they didn't realise water scarcity in the UK. I don't think so. Oh, right, there's a link with carbon. Is there? Nobody told me that. Why should I care? My water bill's low. You know, oh, there's a link between how much water I bring out of the tap and my local river. People just don't know. So there is a big awareness raising job still to do. And then along the spectrum, we move on to behaviour change. So yeah, in terms of customers, we've got a really long way to go. We're very much the poor cousin of energy efficiency and carbon water efficiency, but we're working on it. We've achieved a lot in the last 10 years. So we're optimistic that we can achieve real behaviour change before there's a big water crisis. You know, ideally we would do that beforehand, and politicians would be happy with that. And water ministers in DEFRA under subsequent governments have always been really enthusiastic about water efficiency and metering, which is a key part of the toolkit. But it's the centre of government that's always a problem.
Any other questions, anyone? Nope. Shall we thank Nikki for the very nice journey that took us today from politics to water, and all the volunteering work that you're doing with WaterWise is very, very interesting, showing that you can really change stuff. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's a real honour and joy to talk about it all. And I think it's going up, we might be going up on YouTube as well, mightn't we? So
yeah.
It may take a little time because we've got a bit of a backlog at the moment.
It might be a while.
But it will be, it will go up on the YouTube channel that we have. I did put in the link if people want to see this and other past webinars. I will just pop it in again so that you can see. So I'll pop that in the chat if anyone's interested in that. And yes, I'd like to thank both the Urban Drainage Members Group and also Nikki for this very interesting talk. The last in the series at the moment of career stories, but I think they really are useful because you've got all sorts of different ways people's careers develop. And obviously over the years, the opportunities have changed as well. And as you said, with the information superhighway,
I know.
and here we are now, so dependent on the internet. So it's a really interesting talk, and I hope that everyone found that informative.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, anyway, for your time.
Thanks again, Nikki.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Taken well. Bye.
Bye-bye.